The banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah from Baghdad to Constantinople and beyond. The proclamation of Baha'u'llah. This is my perspective of the account of the banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of Baha'i Faith, from Baghdad, Iraq to Constantinople and beyond. A banishment and exile that culminated in the glorious proclamation of Baha'u'llah to the kings and rulers. The life of Baha'u'llah, as the life of the prophet founders of the major religions of the world, was beset with persecution, imprisonment, banishment, and exile. Through this presentation, I wish to share my reflections on the 4 phases of the banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah. May the magnitude and passion of such glorious yet harsh periods from the life of Baha'u'llah inspire and energize the viewer. On one hand, may it impassion those dedicated to Baha'i Faith. On the other hand, in others, may it generate such interest as to inspire them to investigate the claims and principles of this faith. The unfoldment of the prophetic mission of Baha'u'llah was in 3 phases. The secret intimation to Baha'u'llah in the prison known as the Siyah in Tehran, Iran, in 1852. In its significance and ecstasy, that secret intimation to Baha'u'llah may be likened to the experience of Zoroaster of 7 successive dreams, of Moses with a burning bush, of the descent of the Holy Ghost upon Jesus, and the voice of Gabriel to Muhammad. The second phase was the declaration, the announcement of his mission to his companions in Baghdad, Iraq, in 1863. That disclosure, that announcement reached its zenith in the 3rd phase, the proclamation of his mission from Constantinople, Adrianople, and on to the penal colony of Akka, to the kings and rulers in 1863, to the end of his earthly life in 1892. Now let's take a brief look at the course of the banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah from Tehran to Baghdad on a schematic map of the region. This map shows the neighboring Iraq. At that time, Iraq was part of the Ottoman Empire. That secret intimation to Baha'u'llah was the 1st phase. In revelation of his mission in 1852 in Tehran, in the prison known as the Siyah. On January 12, 1853, just a few months after the release of Baha'u'llah from that prison, together with some of the members of his family, Baha'u'llah was banished from Iran, escorted by an officer of the imperial bodyguard to assure his safety. In the severe cold of winter, he set out on a 3-month journey over the western snow-capped mountains of Iran toward Iraq to Baghdad. Arriving in Baghdad on April 8, 1853. A year later, on April 8, 1854, together with an attendant, Baha'u'llah suddenly set out toward the wilderness of Sulaymaniyeh. In the mountains of Kurdistan, removed from human habitation, he lived in Sargalu mountain. His sojourn in Sargalu may be likened to the seclusion of the prophet founders of the great religions of the world. Moses went to the mountain, Mount Sinai. Moses stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights. He received the 10th commandment. Jesus went to the wilderness, the desert. Muhammad went to a cave in Mount Hira near Mecca and received messages from Allah from God. After almost 2 years of seclusion in Soleimaniye, Baha'u'llah returned to Baghdad on March 19, 1856. 7 years later, on April 21, 1863, was that magnificent second phase in the declaration, the announcement of his mission. In that idyllic setting that has come to be known as the Garden of Rizwan, the disclosure of the mission of Baha'u'llah reached its zenith through its third phase, starting from Constantinople and Adrianople on in the Ottoman Empire, and continuing onward to the close of his earthly life in 1892 in the penal colony in Akka as a prisoner and an exile. The second phase in the unfoldment of Baha'u'llah's prophetic mission was in the Garden of Rizwan. At this point, I wish to place attention on the second phase of the unfoldment of his mission at the Garden of Rizwan by referring briefly to certain significant events that preceded his arrival in the Garden of Rizwan. On the occasion of Nowruz, March 21, 1863, Baha'u'llah had pitched his tent in Mazra-e Bashkash on the outskirts of Baghdad. Therein, Baha'u'llah revealed the writing known as the Tablet of the Holy Mariner. Its theme is the story of the covenant and man's unfaithfulness to it. From the tone of that writing, it became evident that the chapter of Baghdad was to come to a close. Tents which were pitched were to be folded up. Tents had not yet been taken away when an emissary of Namir Pasha, the governor of Baghdad, arrived asking Baha'u'llah to come for an interview with the governor at the governor's headquarters. Not wanting to meet the authorities in government headquarters, Baha'u'llah suggested meeting in a certain mosque in the city. Namir Pasha, who greatly admired Baha'u'llah, had hesitated for 3 months to convey to Baha'u'llah the order for his banishment from Baghdad to Constantinople. After having received orders from the Ottoman Prime Minister for the 5th time, he delivered the message to Baha'u'llah in a mosque through his deputy. The news of the imminent departure of Baha'u'llah from Baghdad to Constantinople spread rapidly among the inhabitants of Baghdad and neighboring towns. Many wished to attain his presence. Learning of this, the notable Namir Pasha placed his garden park, Najibiyeh, at the disposal of Baha'u'llah. Najibiyeh became known as the Garden of Rizwan. This garden was at the outskirts of Baghdad, across the river from the house of Baha'u'llah. On April 21, in the afternoon, Baha'u'llah arrived in Najibiyeh garden. Now the splendid declaration of Baha'u'llah's mission to his companions in 1863 in Baghdad, in the remarkable and idyllic Najibiyeh garden, subsequently designated by his followers as the Garden of Rizwan. Thus was signalized the commencement of what has come to be recognized as the holiest and the most significant of all Baha'i festivals, the declaration of Baha'u'llah in the Garden of Rizwan, April 21 to May 3, 1863. This period marks the second phase in the disclosure of the mission of Baha'u'llah, that is, to his companions. This phase was a prelude to that final glorious stage, his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time. Let us now reflect on that celebrated declaration in the Garden of Rizwan. Baha'u'llah was in the Garden of Rizwan for 12 days. from April 21 through May 3rd. Now, some years since, let us see ourselves in the setting of the Garden of Rizwan. Let us then place ourselves in his presence. Let us relish the beauty and the fragrance of his roses, the songs of his nightingales, and foremost, the presence of Baha'u'llah in our midst. The eminent Baha'i historian, Nabil Azam, relates, every day at the hour of dawn, the gardeners would pick the roses which lined the 4 avenues of the garden and would pile them in the center of the floor of his blessed tent. All these roses Baha'u'llah would, with his own hands, entrust to those to whom he dismissed from his presence every morning to be delivered on his behalf to his Arab and Persian friends in the city. Nabil continues, so great would be the heap that when his companions gathered to drink their morning tea in his presence, they would be unable to see each other across it. Nabil continues, one night, the 9th night of the waxing moon, I happened to be one of those who watched beside his blessed tent. As the hour of midnight approached, I saw him issue from his tent, pass by the places where some of his companions were sleeping, and begin to pace up and down the moonlit flower-bordered avenues of the garden. Nabil relates, so loud was the singing of the nightingale. Nightingales are proverbial for their expression of love and adoration for the rose. In poetic and mystical writings, nightingales symbolize the love of the lover for the rose, for the beloved. In early morning, a nightingale sings his adoration for the rose. Nightingales symbolize the love of man for the divine. Among poets and mystics, the love of nightingale for the rose symbolizes the selfless and impassioned love of the lover for the beloved, of man for the divine, for the manifestation, the prophet for God. So loud was the singing of the nightingales on every side that only those who were near him could distinctly hear his voice. He continued to walk until, pausing in the midst of one of the avenues, he observed, consider the nightingales. So great is their love for the roses that sleepless from dusk till dawn, they warble their melodies and commune with burning passion for the object of adoration. How then can those who claim to be afire with the rose-like beauty of the beloved choose to sleep? Regarding the significance of Baha'u'llah's declaration in the Garden of Rizwan, Baha'u'llah acclaims that historic occasion as the most great festival, the king of festivals. They whereon all created things were immersed in the sea of purification. Rejoice with exceeding gladness, O people of Baha, as ye call to resemblance the day of supreme felicity. On this occasion, Baha'u'llah revealed a magnificent tablet called The Divine Springtime is Come. This is in exquisite form. Baha'u'llah holds dialogue with his pen, the vehicle of his revelation, of his sacred writing. The tablet starts with Baha'u'llah addressing his pen with these moving words: the divine springtime is come, O most exalted pen, for the festival of the All-Merciful is fast approaching. Bestir thyself and magnify before the entire creation the name of God, and celebrate his praise in such wise as all that are created may be regenerated and made new. Speak and hold not thy peace. Arise before the nations of the earth and arm thyself with the power of this most great name, and be not of those who tarry. The departure of Baha'u'llah from the Garden of Rizwan. The order of Ali Pasha, the minister of the Ottoman Sultan, had been communicated to Baha'u'llah for his banishment toward Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. In courteous language, the letter invited Baha'u'llah to proceed to Constantinople as the guest of the Ottoman government. Thus, order had been issued for his banishment from Baghdad to Constantinople. The time of departure of Baha'u'llah from the Garden of Rizwan had come. The departure was at noon on 14th of Zulqa'dah, 1279 Anno Hijra. That is May 3rd, 1863. Emotions were stirred to such depths as no tongue can describe. Let us try to visualize that departure. Mounted on his steed, a red-roan stallion of the finest breed, the best his lovers could purchase for him, and leaving behind him a bowing multitude of fervent admirers, he rode forth on the first stage of a journey that was to carry him to the city of Constantinople. Numerous were the heads, which on every side bowed to the dust at the feet of his horse, and kissed its hoofs, and countless were those who pressed forward to embrace his stirrups. On May 9th, 1863, accompanied by members of his family and 26 of his disciples, Baha'u'llah left Baghdad. From Firajat, at the outskirts of Baghdad, the first stopping place in the course of that journey, they continued onward, taking this path through 22 villages and on toward Samsun on the Black Sea, and from there to Sinop and Aniabole, and then on to Constantinople. Let us visualize that idyllic journey, a procession of caravan of hudas covering a distance of over 1,000 miles in 110 days, headed towards Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. A caravan towards Samsun on the Black Sea. A caravan of 50 mules, a mounted guard of 10 soldiers with their officers, and 7 pairs of hudas, that is kajave, a drawing of kajave huda. Each pair surmounted by 4 paracels, wending its way over a distance of 1,000 miles in 110 days across the uplands and through the fields, the woods, valleys, and pastures, through the picturesque scenery of eastern Anatolia, heading toward the port of Samsun on the Black Sea. Let's visualize that magnificent procession. Kajaves settled on mules. While on move, Baha'u'llah was seated in his kajave. Baha'u'llah was a masterful horseman. He would mount his horse when approaching a village or town to meet the officials. Let us visualize those scenes. Haji Mahmud walked in front, holding the rein of the mule, while Baha'u'llah's Kajave and Ibrahim Amir Nehrisi and Janab Munib walked on either side of the Kajave of Baha'u'llah. Munib, an accomplished youth, educated, a calligrapher and a poet, carried a lantern in front of the Kajave of Baha'u'llah. Munib insisted on walking the entire distance of over 1,000 miles alongside Baha'u'llah's Kajave on foot. Abdul Baha, at that time 19 years old, describes how many nights he and Janab Munib walked on either side of the Huda, that is Kajave, of Baha'u'llah. Let us call forth those stirring scenes. Throughout the way, as they proceeded, they sang continuously. They sang with ecstasy and in jubilation. One of their songs was an ode from the Persian poet Hafiz. It starts with the verses, "Come, let us scatter roses." In the Persian language, "Bia ta gul barafshanim o mi dar saghar andazim, falak ra sakht bishkanim o tarhi no dar andazim." That is, come, let us scatter roses. Let us burst through the roof of heaven and bring forth, create a whole new pattern. In this manner, the caravan continued on this path. The journey of Baha'u'llah from Baghdad toward Constantinople, through 22 small towns and villages, over 1,000 miles in 110 days, before reaching Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. The account of this journey was related by the devoted Agha Hussein Ashchi, a native of Kashan. Ashchi served as a cook. He accompanied Baha'u'llah during all stages of his exile to Akka. Ashchi lived throughout the period of Abdul Baha's ministry and also the early days of the ministry of the guardian of Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi. He recorded much of this history. Each day, they covered a distance of 25 to 30 miles. Each person had tasks and responsibilities. At the end of the day, on reaching a caravanserai, from sheer exhaustion, they would go to sleep. Abdul Baha had little rest. During the stops, he saw to it that the large party, including the animals, were supplied with food and daily necessities. Each one of these places had its own adventures and challenges. By virtue of the written order of Namir Pasha, the governor of Iraq, enthusiastic reception was afforded to the caravan. In some of these places, they received the warm welcome of its inhabitants and officials. In some of these stops, Baha'u'llah was received with splendor, with government cavalry, flags, and drums. In some stops, the whole town came out to hail them and see the safe passage of the caravan. In some places, like Salahiyeh, high officials, the Qa'im Maqam, and other notables came to greet the caravan, offered their respect, and held a festival in their honor. In some places, such as Zaku, they were also received and greeted by the Qa'im Maqam and other notables who had waited at the roadside to greet them, had prepared a feast for them, provided protection, and escorted them. In Mardin, the road lay through the main street of Mardin. Government cavalry, with flags flying and drums beating, preceded the caravan, escorted them by the governor himself and other high officials and notables. The whole town had come out to see the passage of the caravan. In this manner, the caravan continued on this path through the picturesque eastern Anatolia, coursing through fields, woods, pastures, valleys, lowlands, and uplands of mountains, such as this in Amasya. In such spirit, they coursed through the entire path, through the lowlands and uplands towards Samsun on the Black Sea. They continued singing those verses from Hafiz, that is, come, let us scatter roses. بیا تا گل برافشانیم و فلک را سخت بشکنیم و طرحی نو در اندازیم. Come, let us scatter roses. Let us burst through the roof of heaven and bring forth a whole new pattern. The journey of 110 days reached its destination on the shore of the Black Sea. The caravan of Hudas arrived in Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. In Samsun, the chief inspector of the entire province, extending from Baghdad to Constantinople, accompanied by several pashas, called on Baha'u'llah to offer their utmost respect. The arrival of Baha'u'llah in Samsun on the shore of the Black Sea. While drawing close to the shore of the Black Sea, on that wondrous occasion, sitting in his Hoda Kajave, Baha'u'llah revealed aloud the tablet of Surah Hodaj in honor of that triumphant journey. Baha'u'llah and his retinue took the steamer from Samsun to Sinop to Anyapoli. And on the third day, Sunday, August 16, 1863, Baha'u'llah arrived in Constantinople. The arrival of Baha'u'llah in Constantinople on August 16, 1863, Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire and the seat of the Caliphate. In Constantinople, Baha'u'llah revealed the Loha Abdul Aziz wa Wukala, that is, representatives. This tablet was addressed to Sultan Abdul Aziz and representatives. Through an official, Shamsi Beg, this tablet was delivered to Ali Pasha, the Prime Minister. Sultan Abdul Aziz failed to respond. The text of this tablet is not available. However, its tenor can be perceived from certain paragraphs on Sultan Abdul Aziz in the Surah Muluk, Surah of Kings. The Surah of Muluk was addressed at a later date in Adrianople to the concourse of monarchs. Thus, the third and most glorious phase in the unfoldment of the mission of Baha'u'llah, that is the proclamation of his message, had its very beginning in Constantinople. 4 months after the arrival of Baha'u'llah in Constantinople, Sultan Abdul Aziz, the Ottoman Sultan, issued the edict for the banishment of Baha'u'llah from Constantinople to Adrianople. This decision involved his chief ministers, Ali Pasha, the Sultan's prime minister, and Fuad Pasha, the Sultan's foreign minister, and also Mirza Hussein Khan, the Persian ambassador. This was the third banishment of Baha'u'llah. Banishment of Baha'u'llah to Adrianople. They were exiled from Constantinople to Adrianople in the severe cold of winter. Some were mounted on pack animals, others were to ride in wagons. Arrival in Adrianople on December 12, 1863. This was the third banishment of Baha'u'llah. The proclamation of Baha'u'llah that had its beginning in Constantinople continued on with fuller force and greater intensity in Adrianople. Adrianople is at the far corner of the European continent. It is the farthest place from Baha'u'llah's native land, the first time in the history of religions that the manifestation of God came to dwell on the European continent. 5 years later, on August 12, 1868, order was issued for further banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah toward the penal colony of Akka. Banishment of Baha'u'llah from Adrianople to Akka, the penal colony, on August 12, 1868. This was the fourth banishment of Baha'u'llah. The course of Baha'u'llah's banishments is shown on a schematic map of the region. The course of continuing banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah, leading to the glorious phase of his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time. This map refers to the three phases in the unfoldment of the revelation of Baha'u'llah. Phase 1, that secret intimation in 1853 in Tehran. Phase 2, the announcement of his mission to his companions in Baghdad. And phase 3, his proclamation from Constantinople and Adrianople, and on to the third phase of his exile and banishment, which was the Vizinat, the proclamation of Baha'u'llah's mission addressed to the kings and rulers of his time. Had its origin beginning in Constantinople, reached its fuller intensity in Adrianople, and was followed in 1868 with further banishment in the fourth phase of banishment of Baha'u'llah from Adrianople to Akka. This was from Adrianople to Gallipoli, and on to Smyrna, and on to Alexandria, and on to the penal colony of Akka, continuing with fuller brilliancy to the end of Baha'u'llah's earthly life in Akka. The path of that fourth banishment of Baha'u'llah from Adrianople to Akka. From Adrianople on August 12, 1868, taking this path to Uzun-Kopri, on to Kashane, on to Gallipoli, on to Madeli, to Smyrna, to Alexandria, to Port Said, to Jaffa, to Haifa, arriving in Akka on August 31, 1868. Along this path from Kashane to the next stop in Gallipoli, Rais to Ali Pasha, the prime minister of Sultan Abdul Aziz, wherein Baha'u'llah warned and foretold the demise of the Sultanate. In 1876, the Sultanate toppled. Shortly after his arrival in Akka, Baha'u'llah sent a second tablet, the Lohe Rais, to Ali Pasha, the prime minister of Sultan, wherein he predicted that God's wrath and anger would seize him. After a decade, his government was swept into oblivion. In 1876, the Sultanate toppled. Another tablet, Lohe Fa'al, was sent from Akka to Fuad Pasha, the prime minister. Therein, Baha'u'llah affirms his above-mentioned prediction. The arrival of Baha'u'llah at the Bay of Akka on August 31, 1868. Akka was the penal colony to which murderers, highway robbers, and political agitators were consigned from all parts of the Turkish Empire. It was the most desolate of cities. People came to jeer him, the new arrival, a prisoner and an exile. Baha'u'llah had assurance of the victory of his cause. Upon arrival in Akka, he had the most glorious and sublime vision of the triumph of his cause. In the tablet called Loh Sayyah, Baha'u'llah states, "Upon our arrival, we were welcomed with banners of light, whereupon the voice of the Spirit cried out, saying, 'Soon will all that dwell on earth be enlisted under these banners.'" Thus Baha'u'llah predicted the success of his cause. Together with those who accompanied him, Baha'u'llah was cast in the prison of Akka, the most great prison, the prison which murderers, highway robbers, and political agitators were consigned from all parts of the Turkish Empire. The order issued by the Sultan was to subject the exiles who had been accused of leading others astray to long time imprisonment with strict confinement. Their daily ration of food was 3 loaves of black bread for each prisoner. The farman, that is the order of the Sultan, that the prisoner should not associate with the local inhabitants, was read publicly soon after the arrival of the exiles in the prison principal mosque of this city. Through the course of this 4th phase of his banishment and exile, the proclamation of Baha'u'llah continued with full force. Baha'u'llah continued to address the kings and rulers of his time, a process which had started from Constantinople and Adrianople and had continued through the course of his banishment to Akka, now continued on from the most great prison of Akka. During the course of his imprisonment in the most great prison, some of the followers traveled on foot from distant parts to catch a glimpse of him. Baha'u'llah viewed them from that upper cell, window of the upper cell of the most great prison, overlooking the desolate bay of Akka. They felt blessed to just see the motion of the hand of Baha'u'llah. One tender event was that of Ustad Ismail Ardekani, who arrived from Mosul on foot. He walked on foot, posted himself on the far side of the moat, and gazed for hours at the window. Due to the weakness of his sight, Ustad Ismail Ardekani could not see the motion of the hand of Baha'u'llah. From this prison, Baha'u'llah's proclamation to the kings and rulers continued, shedding its light with greater intensity, with greater brilliancy. In the words of Abdul Baha, it's now a star, it became a mighty sun. Due to mobilization of Turkish troops, after 4 months, Baha'u'llah and those who accompanied him were removed from the barracks. The proclamation of his mission continued after Baha'u'llah left the great prison of Akka. From the house of Abud, within the city wall, Baha'u'llah revealed the Book of Aqdas, his most holy book, the charter of the future civilization, wherein he addressed some of the noblest passages of his most holy book. Therein he issued summons to several sovereigns and also to the presidents of the great republic of the West, and also addressed the collective body of ecclesiastics. Therein, once again, he announced his mission to the kings of the earth, both in the East and in the West, both Christian and Muslim, who had admonished and warned in the Surah of Muluk, revealed in Adrianople. Along the path of his banishment and exile, starting from Constantinople on, Baha'u'llah addressed summons to kings and rulers. The scope of the outreach of Baha'u'llah through his extensive proclamation to the kings and rulers is unprecedented in the annals of religions. The summons of Baha'u'llah to the kings and rulers was extensive. It may be classified and organized in a number of ways. Baha'u'llah's summon to the kings and rulers. I wish to present a brief overview of the extent of these summons based on the place from where they were issued. From Constantinople, the tablet to Sultan Abdulaziz of Turkey. From Adrianople, first tablet to Napoleon III, tablet to Nasruddin Shah, tablet to the kings collectively. From Gallipoli, Surey Rais to Ali Pasha. From Akka, the second tablet to Napoleon, tablet to Tsar Alexander II, tablet to Queen Victoria, tablet to Pope Pius IX, and in the Atlas to Wilhelm I, Franz Joseph, the presidents of the Republic of America, to the Sultan of Turkey, to the ecclesiastics collectively. And to complete this overview of the scope, the extent, and range of these summons, there were two additional tablets from Akka. That is the Lohe Rais to Ali Pasha, the Prime Minister of Sultan Abdul Aziz, and the Lohe Fuad to Fuad Pasha, the Foreign Minister of the Sultan. Fuad Pasha, the Foreign Minister who had passed away. Once again, the course of the proclamation of Baha'u'llah to the kings and rulers. That is the third phase in his announcement, his proclamation to the kings and rulers. The third glorious phase of his proclamation, the zenith in the disclosure of his mission that had started in Constantinople, Adrianople, and on through the course of his fourth banishment and exile, had far-reaching scope, a process which had started in Constantinople and on to Adrianople, shown greater brilliancy in Akka. The third phase in the disclosure of his mission, his proclamation, its zenith, its pinnacle, was extensive. It encompassed letters and summons to the kings and rulers individually, and also to the kings and rulers collectively. Baha'u'llah wrote to the religious leaders and ecclesiastics of the Zoroastrian, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic faiths, and also addressed humanity. His proclamation had a wide scope. The outreach of his proclamation to the kings and rulers individually, to the kings and rulers collectively, to the ecclesiastics individually, to an ecclesiastic individually, to the ecclesiastics collectively, and to humanity. The proclamation of Baha'u'llah to the kings and rulers addressed by Baha'u'llah individually. And these were Napoleon III, Emperor of the French from 1852 to 1870. Kaiser Wilhelm, German Emperor, 1871 to 1888. Franz Joseph, King of Austria, King of Hungary, from 1848 to 1916. Tsar Alexander II, Emperor of the Russian Empire, from 1818 to 1881. Queen Victoria, Queen of United Kingdom and Ireland, from 1837 to 1901, and Empress of India, from 1876 to 1901. Nasser-ad-Din Shah, the Qajar dynasty from 1848 to 1896, and Sultan Abdul Aziz, the Ottoman Emperor from 1861 to 1876, Pope Pius IX from 1846 to 1878. The scope of the proclamation of Baha'u'llah. The scope of the proclamation of Baha'u'llah, his messages to the kings and rulers, ecclesiastics, and humanity, was expansive. Baha'u'llah, as a prisoner and exile, proclaimed his message to the most powerful rulers of his time, as well as to the ecclesiastics and religious leaders, and also in general to humanity. Such outreach is a reflection of the breadth of his mission for the reconstruction of society and his vision of a global civilization wherein all nations, races, and religions can be unified. He admonished those rulers to heed his guidance. Religious leaders, ecclesiastics of the Zoroastrian, Jewish, Christian, and Islam were addressed collectively. Pope Pius IX was addressed individually. The outreach and wide scope of such commanding summons to the sovereigns and potentates and religious leaders, from a prophet founder of a religion, a prisoner, and an exile, is unprecedented in the history of religions. The proclamation of Baha'u'llah to the kings and rulers, the path to peace. These letters, writings, were sent at a critical point in history. Animosity, hostility, and conflict were at high levels. Europe was in turmoil. The buildup of armaments had escalated. European countries were stockpiling their weapons. Europe was at the brink of a major conflagration. The exigencies of the times required warnings. Through such extensive summons, Baha'u'llah offered the path to peace while there was yet time. In these summons, messages, Baha'u'llah asked the kings and rulers to heed his guidance, to forestall their pileup of armaments, to reconcile their differences, and look after the welfare of their subjects. We may wonder, had the call of Baha'u'llah been heeded when there was yet a window of opportunity for peace, would the First World War have been averted? And consequently, the Second World War? Baha'u'llah offered the path to peace while there was yet time. It was not heeded. Alas, the First World War broke out 22 years after the end of the earthly life of Baha'u'llah. This call raised by a captive and an exile and a prisoner, addressed to the most powerful and influential rulers of his time and to the ecclesiastics and humanity, will reverberate over the ages and centuries. May it admonish and instruct the war-torn humanity to follow the path to peace toward the reconciliation and reconstruction of society. At the conclusion of this presentation, I want to thank the viewer for watching this video on the banishment and exile of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of Baha'i Faith, the most recent world religion. My intent in producing this video is to familiarize the viewers with the momentous period in the life of Baha'u'llah that culminated in his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time. In this presentation, we took a brief look at the 4 periods in the exile and banishment of Baha'u'llah that spanned over 40 years. These included the first stage, Baha'u'llah's exile and banishment from Tehran, Iran to Baghdad, Iraq. The second stage, his banishment from Baghdad, Iraq, to Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The third stage, his banishment from Constantinople to Adrianople, culminating in the fourth stage, his banishment from Adrianople and exile, until the end of his earthly life in the penal colony of Akka. The ministry of Baha'u'llah culminated in its glorious third phase through his proclamation to the kings and rulers of his time, to the ecclesiastics of the Zoroastrian, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic faiths, and to humanity.